What's going on, guys? Jimmy Changa here. Today I kind of just wanted to talk about ALife and really kind of explain what ALife is and what it does and what GSC aims for it to bring to the player during their playthrough and experience. Because I'm seeing a lot of confusion online, and outside of that I'm also seeing kind of the sentiment that it's just a spawn system which, spawns enemies around the player. That, my friends, is only one very, very small, minute part of what ALife does. It is far more than just a spawn system. In fact, I would argue that it's not even really a spawn system, and GSC would probably tell you the same thing. Now, what ALife does is it creates a scenario where it simulates all life in the zone. So what do I mean by that? Well, essentially it takes every single NPC in this region, well, not even the region. Look at that. That's a perfect example. So I had a quest going where I needed to retrieve a case for duty, and then you heard gunfire in the background. Well, that was a team of, I don't know who did it for me. Duty, somebody, just killed whoever had that case. So that is done. All I have to do now is go retrieve that case off of the dead corpse and then bring it to duty. So that's ALife working in the background for me. And that happens all the time. Say I take a quest from somebody that instructs me to kill a group of bandits or a group of mutants. And I'm just wandering the zone, doing my own thing. And the next thing I know, the PDA pops up a message like that saying, hey, your quest is complete. That, in Stalker 2's current form right now, just can't happen. The game right now has taken ALife out so they could worry about optimization. So what they did is they basically fed resources to optimization that were originally allocated to ALife. ALife, is a complex system that takes some compute power, which, some people argue, oh, why would I dedicate all this compute power to simulate life in the regions or an area that I'm not even in? Well, guys, they've did this before in all three of their games, and currently we're in Clear Sky, and they did it in this game on single core processors. So it's just really the matter of them getting the game optimized to a state where they're comfortable with, and then finding the resources to throw back in ALife. Because I think really the main issue was just getting it optimized on console, specifically Series S. So with all that out of the way, we already seen one example of a quest unfolding without me even having to do anything. Here's another example of ALife working. This is not static. This is not scripted right here. This happened, and this is just punishment. This is, this is the zone just filtering people out. So what happened here is it looks like, a group of snorks stormed this checkpoint here, and Duty tried fending them off, and unfortunately, they were not successful. It looks like they were able to kill them, but they died in the process, which leads me to believe that there are still snorks somewhere around here. So, get this. We can actually really So get this, I can explain ALife for the most part, mainly just by looking at my map here. So if we pull up the map, so as Duty yells in the background here, if we pull up our map, we notice a couple things right off the bat. A, we got a bunch of dots here. All these dots represent groups of people, whether it's groups of duty, groups of freedom, groups of stalkers, groups of monolith, groups of clear sky, just all the different factions, groups of mutants. Now, here's a good example. Yellow is duty because I'm neutral with them. Green is ally. Red is enemies. See how this is light yellow rather than the solid yellow right here? That's because this group of duty right now has a target. They're actually moving right now. So as you can see, their target is the barrier. So we could realistically watch the map and follow them to whatever barrier that they're going to. Right here, another group of duty heading to the barrier. Now, what the beauty of this is since all of these NPCs, despite where the player's at, it does not matter where I'm at. As you can see, they all show in every region regardless of where I am. This allows the NPCs to have free reign over their life, hence ALife, which dynamically changes the map over time. So what do I mean by that? Well, you got freedom over here. Okay? That's their main base of operations. You have duty right here. This is their main base of operations. Garbage sits in between them. Alright? Now, what I did in this playthrough is I helped the loners take back garbage from the bandits. But now in doing so, I opened up the perfect opportunity for duty and freedom to travel into garbage now that there's less conflict to worry about. And they are going to fight each other over points of interest. Now, this necessarily doesn't have to happen inside of garbage. But say I'm all the way up here in the Red Forest, and freedom and duty end up running into each other. Now, here's the perfect example of that. As you can see, we got Duty, who's trying to get to the barrier, and then you got Freedom, who just came from the barrier, because that barrier takes you to Dark Valley, which is Freedom's compound. They're in combat with each other right now. So if we were over there, we would literally be witnessing that, and bam, just like that, Duty has wiped Freedom from the map. They are gone forever. Say they're fighting over a POI. Say that group of duty ends up killing Freedom. Well, they might actually decide that they want to set up shop at that point of interest. And then the next thing I know, I come back down there later in the game, and that dead point of interest now has a bunch of duty members set up in it, and they might have decided to set up a vendor on top of that. So, the dynamic changing of the map is what makes ALife so immersive, because you quite literally just go about your playthrough as a normal game, and then all around you, you can take solace in knowing that there is stuff happening, regardless if the player is active. So right here, these people traveling right next to me is a group of duty. You can see right here. Duty going to the barrier. So we can follow them the whole way to this barrier where they will set up shop and guard. So this guy's lagging a little behind. But I can run, like, where Stalker will despawn these guys completely after 100 meters, and then they're gone forever since they're randomly generated NPCs. I can run away. I'm way far in the distance here. And I can come back. And, like, that guy never left. We could see him from way back there. And then as I get up here, you can already see off to the left there, these guys are still in the game. They're not random. They have names. They're persistent. They will be on this map forever until one of them dies. And when they die, well, their corpse will be back there. And there will be maybe some loot there, maybe not. Because when these guys come across a dead body, they will 100% loot that dead body. So these guys currently are programmed to go to this barrier and help these guys defend it. And ultimately, it's an important barrier for these guys because, as I stated before, Freedom now can travel safely over here to Garbage and ultimately can go over here and try to take this base, which that happens. There's faction wars in this game. So ultimately, Freedom and Duty are going to battle, and whoever ends up the victor will control this region and this region. So if you look at our faction tab here, we have our faction war tab and we got statistics. The statistics essentially roll into the faction war, and the faction war runs into the statistics. Now, just looking at this right now, at this point in the game, in this save, I am still aligned with the loners. Alright, now that can change. You don't have to be part of one faction for the entire playthrough. So, you know, essentially, organically, what will happen is you'll start out with the loners because you come from the Great Swamps, make it into the Cordon. That's where you're going to meet the loners, and then you ultimately have to push north. So you can choose to do this mechanic or you can choose not to. ALife is going to make it play out regardless of the player's intervention. So what you can do is you can join the loners, which is going to be a lot of help as you progress up through Garbage, because they're going to help you take on a lot of these bandits. Because when you first run into Garbage, this is littered with red enemy circles just guarding every single one of these barriers, nothing but bandits. And then ultimately the bandits control the depot, which is their main compound. So as you start trudging through, you start knocking out all these barrier checkpoints from bandits. And as you knock them out, loners will take over that barrier. But since this is kind of a neutral territory, you'll find, hey, sometimes you'll find Duty guarding a barrier, sometimes you'll find Freedom guarding a barrier. But since the Cordon is down south, naturally you're going to have loners guarding the southern checkpoints. Since Agripom is Duty's compound here, you're going to have Duty guarding these checkpoints. And then since Freedom owns the Dark Valley, you got Freedom on these barriers. So it kind of all just makes sense. Everybody takes their place because they're smart. In this ALife system, the NPCs are pretty darn smart. And you got to think about how old this game is and how far ahead of its time that this mechanic, this ALife system, this intelligent NPC system was. So with that being said, what happened is we defeated the bandits. As you can see, the enemy squads are down to essentially nothing, and they have no resources left. So no meds, no food, no ammo, no guns. The bandits are wiped, and that is reflected on the statistics page. So if you look, we got the bandits are ranked 6th. Now, this isn't all the factions yet either. This is only the factions that you've run into to this point. So, with Scar being pretty darn early in this playthrough, he has only ran into these 6 factions. Well, out of these 6 factions, the bandits are the worst right now. Their faction strength is at a 7, and if I'm not mistaken, that's their numbers. So they got 7 members running around somewhere in the zone. Who the heck knows where? They're done. The loners have won. They've won this war, and because of that, they have moved in to the depot, probably set up a vendor inside of here, and now this is a safe haven for stalkers to come. And since the loners are neutral with a good bit of the factions, especially the ones that are running around in Garbage right now, Duty and Freedom can come to this depot. So with that being said, going back to the statistics page, if we look right now, Duty is on top. They got, the most faction strength, then followed by Freedom. So this ultimately is going to be a very bloody war when it takes place. But if you also look over here, you probably notice enemies and friends. So each time you do a good deed for a faction, say you take a quest for them, or even as simple as you run into, let's say you run into a Freedom member that's lying on the ground, just got in a fight, and he needs healed. You pop him with a stem, guess what? You just made a friend for life. He will not forget that, and he will instantly go green, and that's going to add to a friend hash for that respected group. Now say the opposite, say you kill a Freedom member in cold blood, guess what? You just made an enemy for life. Or if you just shot one and ran away, you made an enemy for life. So as you start doing evil or good deeds per faction, these are going to fill up. And ultimately, as you start picking off members of each faction, their numbers are going to dwindle. Or if a faction starts to get stronger and they start to gain more territory, they're going to gain more numbers because people are going to see that that faction, you know, is strong, and they have that, like, people in the zone take notice to that and they want to be a part of it. So the numbers will grow. So as you can see, duty is on the uptick. Freedom is on the uptick. The Stalkers are on the uptick. Clear Sky is on the downtick. So if I join Freedom or Duty, this screen for the faction war will change, and I will be taking place in that faction war for said group. So we'll use Duty as an example. Say I go join Duty over here in Agripalm. Ultimately, their goal is territory. They want to kill off the Freedom faction, which ultimately will have them controlling not only Agripalm, but they will also control the Dark Valley. So this faction war page will change to Duty over here, which will be my clan, versus Freedom over here. And these statistics will change based on the two factions that you have going on. And then from there, you'll have different tasks and stuff that you need to help Duty or Freedom, whoever you join. And you'll start slowly chipping away at the numbers over here. So you'll start with the barriers, then you'll start with some POIs. You know, say we take this burnt homestead. You know, Duty, as you take these out, will start moving into these POIs. So essentially, you get that sense of, you know, completion. As you start doing stuff, you're starting to notice the zone to change. Well, guess what? And we'll leave it at this. Even if the player decides, you know what, I'm not taking part in any of these faction wars, these guys are going to fight regardless. It'll be a little later in your playthrough, but you'll start to notice down here, the zone is going to start to change. And, you know, it's essentially a dice roll who takes this fight. But whoever takes the fight is ultimately going to end up controlling said territory. Alright guys, so here we are in a completely vanilla version of Call of Pripyat, because the good thing is, the game is the most stable out of the original three, to the point where you don't even need a mod. So, console, anything can play this bug-free, zero issues for the most part. So, right off the rip, what I want to show is here we are at the Ash Heap Anomaly. Look what you see here. We have stalkers hunting artifacts in groups. So realistically, if you let this guy do his thing long enough, he's gonna collect some artifacts, and you could be an asshole and kill him and take his artifacts, letting him do all the dirty work for you. You know, that's just another layer added on to everything else that ALife offers. Now, if we just watch him for a little bit, we'll actually see him try to grab an artifact. Which, I mean, this is going to probably be longer for me than it is for you. But obviously, I'll edit this down until I get the exact spot where he grabs an artifact. Looks like he's getting closer, and ba-bam. He tried grabbing an artifact. look at this. So look at this. We have ALife working in action here again, because you constantly have mutants, you know, running around. You got stalkers patrolling. These guys, again, just, they don't disappear. And we're just letting this unfold. I mean, I'll give, well, it's a little too late for that. I was gonna say, I'll give them some help. But, unfortunately, every single guy perished in this attack. I think we got a Chimera over there. We're bleeding. Alright. Am I nuts, or did I see a Chimera over here? Yeah, it was a boar. Alright, so, I mean, look at this. We got... Oh, so there was more going on than we originally thought. So what happened here is, as we see this mess of bodies, just by a little bit of detective work, it looks like we had Freedom that ran into Duty, and we all know Freedom and Duty don't like each other. They started fighting, attracted the mutants, and the mutants ultimately won. I mean, let's be honest, the zone does always win at the end of the day, but unfortunately, ALife again claims another group of stalkers here. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I mean, it's a bloodbath. So again, as I'm looting these bodies here, you know, I noticed a couple of them were missing some stuff here. You know, a couple of them really didn't have any... Where's the good weapons here? Well, then I got to this guy, and this cheeky bastard seemed to be picking, you know, his spoils clean before those mutants stormed in and absolutely smoked the remainder of this mess. So, again, ALife kind of working itself out. This guy, you know, taking the loot, because at the end of the day, there's the Yanov station. He ain't too far from selling that loot. He almost had a nice little payday. And as you can see, he was getting there. You know, he was about to get all the loot, and then, nope. That's when all those mutants came in and kind of ruined this guy's day. And now, unfortunately, he's face down in the dirt. So here we got a nice little conflict here at the army warehouses, where we got some action going on here. At this point, I'm not really quite sure of the faction action that we got going on here, but we're balls deep into killing some bandits. Now, this is Stalker Anomaly, but rest assured, every single thing that you see here in terms of how the ALife mechanics unfold are absolute vanilla in terms of the other 3 games. This happens in Stalker, Shadow of Chernobyl, Clear Sky, and Call of Pripyat. I'm just using clips that I have available from my playthroughs, but what just happened here is, you know, we have, it looks to be, I don't know, stalkers. So just a group of stalkers that I accidentally ran into, and a group of bandits. And as you can see down there, he's saying, "Surrender, asshole, we know you're wounded." This bandit is sitting here pleading for help here, as everybody kind of just crowds around him. And ultimately, everybody's a little apprehensive. Nobody wants to ultimately be the guy to take this poor dude's life. But somebody's got to do it, and rest assured, it will happen. And just like that, this ruthless killer just puts a bullet right in his face. Now, what's about to happen is the whole point I'm showing this clip. Because I don't have any clips handy right now in the other games. So we're going to use this as an example. Now, in a second, you're going to see, which is going to snowball off of the Call of Pripyat clip that I just showed of that duty guy stuffed with loot. As you can see, this guy runs up and he starts looting that body. And we're going to walk on over here and picked clean. Nothing. He's just got junk. Because they're not going to take junk. They don't take junk in any of the games. They take what's valuable. And then you got a message down there saying, armored leather jacket, that's the best thing I found on his corpse. I'm not going to complain about that. Boys and girls, that's immersion. That is what we want in ALife, and that's what we always had. But Anomaly kind of adds... It takes the messages to the next level. So those messages from the PDA that were popping up as we were gunfighting, that happens in the vanilla games. It just doesn't happen as often. So I think when everybody heard ALife 2.0, we were really kind of hoping that GSC took note of that and ramped it up. But as far as looting the bodies, that has been a staple in Stalker from the beginning, since Shadow of Chernobyl. So if you're late on looting a body, if you just got done, you know, fighting some bandits or something off with some allies, well, then you're screwed. You just lost that loot. If you want that loot, you're going to have to kill an ally to get it off of his dead body. Now, here I heard some gunfire, so I'm going to investigate. Now, the whole reason that you don't have those messages and stuff in Stalker 2 right now is because none of the NPCs are persistent. They're all randomly generated. So, since there's no real life outside of 100 meters in the zone in Stalker 2, they just don't have the infrastructure for all these events in the PDA and the tabs to happen as we watch this guy kill this guy in cold blood and loot his body. They just do not have the infrastructure set up because ALife just isn't in the game. So they replaced it for now with a basic spawner that just drops randomly generated groups of enemies within a 100-meter radius of you. But since they're not persistent, they can't track them. And since they can't track the NPCs, there is no way to have a rankings tab. There's no way to have a statistics tab. There's no way to randomly create these scenarios that you're seeing. They don't even loot bodies right now. So really every core ALife mechanic is just absent. And since it's absent, that's why everything kind of just feels empty and dull. But eventually, I have full faith that GSC will patch this, and we will have ALife, and I just cross my fingers that they take a lot of this PDA immersion from Anomaly and from the older games and bring it into Stalker 2, because I can't speak for everybody, but I think that I do speak for a lot of people when I say that these messages that pop up, say you're firing shots, you'll get a message that says, hey, we just heard whatever caliber of gun that you're using, because they always get it correct. They're like, we just heard small arms fire, or we just heard a shotgun inside of Agripalm, blah, 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 blah. Can someone go check it out? Or if, say, you know, Freedom is being attacked by somebody, they'll be like, hey, we're being attacked by bandits, can we get reinforcements? Just levels of immersion really help the zone feel alive. And then this last example I'm going to pull from Shadow of Chernobyl, so where everything started, and that kind of is the snowball effect here. We're going to snowball into the PDA tabs. Alright, so lastly, to wrap this up, here we are in the original game, Shadow of Chernobyl. We got our rankings and we got our statistics. So these play off of each other. So right here we got, I'm the Mark 1. My statistics are, I killed 9 Grand Stalkers, 1,200 mutants, and 150 completed quests. And then I get a total. That total is then spit out into the rankings. So as you can see, I'm 279th out of, you know, however many Stalkers are in the zone. Well, they keep track of a top 20. So realistically, You got Dimitro Fanatist up top. He is not immortal, guys. He can die. So if he dies, whether it be by an anomaly, a group of other stalkers, anything can happen to this dude. He will lose that spot to Genna Chisel. So it's dynamic. This ranking changes, and you, as the marked one, can go hunt these guys down and kill them yourself if you really want to, and eventually become top dog yourself. It kind of adds like a bounty hunter like mechanic to the game in a way, because not only do you got your side quests, your main quest, you got your basic exploration, which snowballs into random encounters with people that'll ask you to do stuff that isn't even on the map. So whereas in Stalker 2, every side quest, shows up as a blue flag on the map, in Stalker, like in this original trilogy, you have to hunt those down. Like, you got to talk to the people, and because they're not going to show up on your map. Like, the side quests aren't going to show up on your map. Like, you got a couple different kind of quests in this game. Like, you can get them from the barkeep, you can get them from, other important characters, but then you can also just run into random people and ask them if they need any help with something. And that is just considered a random encounter. But all of that is going to add up to your rank. And then that is going to rank you out of all the stalkers in the zone. So when you hear people talk about, PDA tabs in some of the comments or on Reddit, this is what they're referring to. I mean, hell, guys, it was in the very first game that you're seeing right now. And here we are 15, 16 years later, and we don't have any of this. And unfortunately, as the game sits right now, Stalker 2, we can't have any of this until GSC figures out a way to balance the optimization with ALife. Because what they've did is they pulled all of the resources from ALife temporarily to get the game optimized enough to ship it on consoles, and ultimately just ship it on all platforms and get the game out the door. And I think the reason that they did this is because Microsoft is funding the game. Not entirely, but a lot of the funding came from Microsoft. So because of that, even though GSC isn't under the Microsoft umbrella, they have expectations since they're funneling the money into the game. And with the holiday season right around the corner, all that Microsoft really had to offer was Indiana Jones in the Great Circle, or whatever the game's called. So Microsoft really needed Stalker 2 to get out the door here, and I honestly think that's the reason we have Stalker 2 in the state that it is. It's essentially early access, and with early access brings problems. So, pulling the resources from ALife introduced, this isn't the actual devs' words, other bugs, and it essentially broke ALife entirely. So they had good intentions behind it, or at least that's how I feel. They wanted to pull some resources from ALife, thinking that the system would still work. Well, it broke ALife completely, and I think in panic, since they already had a date set, they just replaced it with a generic UE5 spawn system that is spawning randomly generated encounters on top of the player within a 100-meter radius. And because of that, anything outside of that 100-meter radius is essentially a dead world. It's empty. Unless it's a base. Bases seem to have a set amount of people and named NPCs. But outside of bases and outside of your main characters, it's all randomly generated NPCs. And since they're randomly generated, they don't technically exist in the world. And because they don't technically exist in the world, you notice they'll despawn as you get 100 meters away. And if you try to run back to them after they despawn, they don't come back. And that's because they're not persistent. They don't actually exist in the world. So if everybody in the world don't exist, then there is nothing to track. And that's the big thing. If there's nothing to track, Well, then why do you need a PDA rankings tab? There is nothing to rank. There is nothing to give statistics on. So they're kind of stuck in this real tricky situation where, man, nothing really exists outside of the side content and the main content and the bases, because it's all just randomly generated. And GSC knows damn well that the core base notices that, and I'm sure they wanted to put their best foot forward, as any company does. And all the newcomers coming into Stalker who don't know what ALife is really just think that it's just this basic spawn system, and they think that the spawn system's broken, and that's why you're having everything spawn on top of you. So the newcomers are thinking, oh, it's just a spawn system, but the spawn radius is supposed to be larger. No, guys, as you've seen in this video, ALife is a massively complex system that offers many different scenarios, and within those scenarios offers many different mechanics, such as looting the bodies, capturing and defending POIs, dynamic changing of the map, being able to tag along with an NPC and go on their adventures with them just by simply going up to them and saying, hey, what are you doing? Can I tag along? Artifact hunting that the NPCs will do, mutant hunting, looting the dead bodies and, taking the loot to sell. They just really everything that the player can do, aside from obviously walking up to a main character and going down a main quest line, the NPCs can do too. So all your basic tasks and exploration and looting and all that, they do too. That's why we need ALife, guys.